Ladies and gentlemen, Diddy didn't handle his business? Is it the videographer? Is it Netflix? Is it the producers that were wrong for airing the footage that nobody's ever seen before? It's a lot of blame going around. Let's get into some of this straight game.
Life is like some cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a brother.
Welcome back, guys. Welcome back. It's your boy Delray Richardson, platinum artist, platinum songwriter, Straight Game TV. Thank you for tuning in. I appreciate your time. Do me a favor, click on the thumbs up button. Also, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And like I always say, if you want to be one of the first people notified when I drop some of this straight game, please do me a favor and click on what appears to be that little bell notification right below this video. I'm going to get right into it. Ladies and gentlemen, so we've heard a lot recently about the video footage in regards to the Sean Combs, the Reckoning documentary, or should I say 4-part docuseries on Netflix, right? Recently just heard Harvey Levin come out and speak with an attorney for Diddy's mom at the time. And I think, prior, back in the day, for Diddy at one time, Mark Garagos. And the question was, did Diddy betray his lawyer, right? In regards to recording Diddy while he was on the phone speaking with his lawyer, which is usually held to a high standard as far as attorney-client privilege. And it's a crazy question because Diddy's legal team basically came out and said the footage was stolen. They tried to blame Netflix for it and all of these other things. So what I want to do today is I want to get into how you really break this down, because, in copyright law or in as far as shooting footage and things like that, Diddy, if he didn't do a work for hire agreement, then Diddy doesn't really own that footage. So if Diddy doesn't own the footage and the videographer was free to go and sell the footage to the producers or whoever the videographer sold the footage to, is Diddy then responsible for the breaking of the attorney-client privilege? It's tricky, but if you really understand it, because I just did a little research and I wanted to bring this to you because I think it's very important. We heard Roger Bond speak about it. We heard 50 Cent speak about it, but it's a little bit more difficult than blaming and saying, well, yo, this is such and such in person fault right here, So did Diddy break his lawyer's his own should I say betray his own lawyer, or did the videographer violate the attorney-client privilege based on the Netflix The Reckoning controversy, right? So now, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, welcome back to Straight Game TV. Your boy platinum songwriter, platinum artist, Delray Richardson. And before we go any further, like I said, hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, because I'm going to delve deep into it, because like I said, there's a lot of fingers being pointed. And I can understand Diddy being mad in regards to the footage being sold. But Diddy doesn't have nobody to blame but himself. Like I said, this is not about taking sides. And I'll say that because of this. If Diddy had a work for hire contract with the videographer, however you want to say it, then the footage wouldn't have been able to be sold. There would have been a firm understanding as to the contractual legalities and the parameters in which the video footage could be used, right? So today we're going to dive into one of the most overlooked, underreported, but legally explosive issues in the new Netflix docuseries, the Sean Combs The Reckoning, right? The secret video, right? Reportedly filmed by a videographer hired by hired to basically document Diddy, for some future project that Diddy perhaps was going to work on. I believe Diddy and Netflix probably was talking about doing something up until his arrest, or probably, during that time, him hiring, and, you can pass that footage over and they can do some kind of editing down and come up with their own documentary. But Diddy got convicted. And so therefore, in him getting convicted, the videographer, whoever he was working for at that particular time, let's say this, because we really don't know. Let's say what we don't know is this. Let's say Diddy had an agreement with Netflix, and Netflix said, well, we'll hire, a videographer to follow you around, document the situation. See, we don't know because Netflix didn't totally volunteer all of the information. Only they said that they obtained the footage legally, right? Okay. Diddy didn't say that he hired the videographer, right? Netflix didn't say that they hired the videographer. So we really don't know who the videographer was working for at that particular time. It's been speculated that the guy was working for Diddy, but we don't know that. They could have been working for Netflix for a future project, and that's why Netflix was able to use the footage and not really be concerned about whether Diddy could do anything or not. Think about it. If you're going to do something, they say, well, look, hey, we'll hire a full-time videographer footage, a videographer to follow you around before the case, during the case, and all of these other things. It was something similar that they were talking about trying to do in the Keefe D case involving the Tupac murder case, right? When Keefe D was trying to get out on bail, they were talking about shooting some kind of reality TV show where they would follow the lawyers around and, the communication between Keefe D and the lawyers as much as they probably possibly could without revealing the strategy in the case. So here comes the documentary, Sean Combs' The Reckoning. And here comes this never before secret footage, right? We don't know who the videographer, we don't know who he was working for. It didn't say that he was working for Diddy. Diddy hasn't said that, they said the footage was stolen. You know what I mean? That's the gist of what went down. The footage was stolen. And between Diddy and his lawyer, while he was under criminal investigation, there was a private phone conversation that took place. Now, the question is, did Diddy betray his own lawyer, or did the videographer commit a major legal violation? Think about it for a minute. They saying, well, Harvey Levin, he didn't actually say it, but basically asking the question to Mark Geragos, well, do you think that, what do you think about it? Do you think that Diddy violated the attorney-client privilege by not telling Mark Agnifilo that he was being recorded? Now, you could look at it one of two ways. You could say, well, Diddy wasn't actually recording Mark Agnifilo on the phone. Diddy was talking to him on the phone while somebody else was recording, right? Now, if they can use the footage in the actual documentary, and Diddy not have any kind of legal, what would you call it? Any kind of legal contractual right to that footage, then is Diddy to blame, because the person who actually shot the footage is the person who owns the footage for what we know right now. Because if he didn't own it, he wouldn't have been able to sell it to the producers or whoever he sold it to, Netflix, the producers or whatever, whoever he sold it to, without a problem from Diddy. So evidently, and we don't know, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, if Diddy's team plan on filing the lawsuit, right? So, but that secret phone conversation where Diddy is talking to his lawyers, some people feel like, well, Diddy should have told his lawyer that, he was shooting some kind of documentary or whatever have you. Now, we don't know if Mark Agnifilo knew about Diddy shooting some kind of potential documentary with the cameras following. See, it's a lot that we don't know, but you can make assumptions about, right? Well, was he wrong about it? We don't know if Mark Agnifilo even knew about it or didn't know about it, because he hasn't said anything. But the appearance is, or what they're trying to create a narrative around, is that did Diddy, betray his lawyer by doing that, and then the footage being released, because that's like the first piece of footage that comes out on the documentary is when he's talking to Mark Agnifilo on the phone and telling Mark Agnifilo, hey, you know what, just listen to me. I'm not a referee. I'm gonna get off the phone and because right now, we're losing. You know what I mean? Like, I guess and I think he was talking about the narrative and trying to put out information to the people and the press about what their stance was on the allegations and the things that were being made at that time, right? By this time, the Cassie's tape is burning up the airwaves. People coming around, they formulating their own opinion, and when that Cassie tape hit, it was doing hella damage. Like I said, if you doubted anything at that particular time, once you seen the Cassie tape, the public had Diddy basically guilty of everything, right? So the secret video reported, filmed by a videographer, right? So now the question is, did Diddy betray his own lawyer, or did the videographer commit a major legal violation? Now I'm gonna say this because you got to understand. In reviewing the footage prior to putting it out on the documentary, right? If they went through every piece of footage, and I'm sure they probably reviewed it, and knowing that Diddy was having a conversation with his lawyer, should the producers had put that in there, right? And not even asking the question as to whether it was attorney-client privilege, and putting that information in the documentary. Number one. Number two, I'm sure Netflix, when you probably, they probably did it, the producers did a deal with Netflix. I'm sure they probably had some kind of indemnification clause, right? Right? Indemnifying them of any legal harm or anything in regards to whatever may arise out of the situation involving that footage, involving any kind of legal action, and involving any kind of anything like that in relation to that. So that's why Netflix could come out and say, hey, you know what? From what they understand, they obtained the footage legally. Like I said, we don't know who the videographer was actually working for. Was it Netflix? Was it Diddy? Right? So now, with that being said, so Netflix includes what? Diddy on the phone discussing legal strategy, case concerns, the public narrative. That's what he was talking about with his lawyer, Mark Agnifilo, right? Right. The camera operator basically still rolling with the audio included, that footage sold or licensed to production, not through Diddy. So now, if it's licensed and sold to the production company, not through Diddy, can you basically say that Diddy betrayed his lawyer, or was it the cameraman, right? Or the production team, by putting that information in there and not basically vetting that information and saying, hey, you know what, this might be attorney-client privilege. We might have some kind of legal problem with this if we release this. You see what I'm saying? So because they said, well, Diddy should have told, the camera guy, well, we don't know what, who, what, when, where, and how the videographer was working for. We just don't know that, right? So the key issue is this, right? Was the videographer operating under a work-for-hire contract? Number one. If yes, then Diddy owns the rights. I would think not, because if that was the case, he wouldn't have been able to sell or license the what's the name, footage to the producers or whoever he licensed them to. Like I said, that still is not clear, right? But neither here nor there, trust me, when Netflix did the deal with the producers for this documentary or docuseries, whatever you want to call it, you can best believe that they have an indemnification clause. Like, hey, look, anything arising out of this, you guys got to handle this legally. Any kind of, licenses that you didn't get or anything like that in regards to the footage. So that's why when they came out, they said that, right? So now, the footage got sold or licensed to production, not through Diddy. He wouldn't have been up in arms if that was the case. So the key issue is this, right? Was the videographer working under a work-for-hire contract? If yes, Diddy owns the rights. I doubt that. If no, the videographer may claim ownership. We still don't know that. But that doesn't remove, listen, no matter who owns the footage, right? That does not remove the attorney-client privilege, right? Or the ethical protections of confidential legal communications, possible civil liabilities for unauthorized disclosure. So now, if you understand that, so no matter who did what, how they did it, it doesn't matter. The attorney-client privilege still overrules, and it's one of the most important, if not the most important legal protections that an attorney and his client can have. You know what I mean? A lot of lawyers and their clients invoke that when information is being sought for different cases and things of that nature, right? But then there's the ethical protection of the confidential legal communications. So now, even though the information was sold to the producer, whoever sold to, should they have used more discretion and actually saying, hey, you know what? I don't think we should use this part, because he's talking to his lawyer. And Diddy makes that very well clear that he's talking to his lawyer. So could the videographer be in trouble? We don't know that, right? Could Netflix be liable, right? Attorney-client privilege, what does it protect, right? Conversations meant to remain confidential, number one. That's what attorney-client privilege protects. Conversations meant to remain confidential, even if overheard by someone mistakenly recording, right? Even if Diddy didn't stop the recording in the moment. You see what I'm saying? That information at the time is still attorney-client privilege. And was it meant to be released to the public? Right? That's a whole nother argument, right? Any outside party who knowingly publishes privileged content can trigger legal actions. So I really don't think this situation is over from that perspective. I don't think they're going to go, like, you know, and they could go after Netflix, they could go after whoever, but any outside party, listen, and this is the tricky one, any outside party who knowingly publishes privileged content can trigger legal actions, right? Invasion of privacy, right? Conversations of privileged material, misappropriation, violation of confidentiality, right? Netflix attorneys knew this, which is why, right, some footage is muted, right? Certain statements are edited. Subtitles, some subtitles may be omitted in certain places, right? Listen. So basically, they tried to skate the edge without crossing a lawsuit, if you will. But the question remains, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, a lot of people not really understanding this. Who sold that footage, right? Because disclosing privilege, a strategy, can jeopardize a defendant's case. It can jeopardize a defendant's appeal, right? And various other things involving future litigation, if you will. You see what I'm saying? The time with Diddy's outside, he's talking about the girl Dawn Ricard and all of this other stuff that he's talking about, the people who filing these civil lawsuits, you know. And I'll say this, the one thing about Diddy is like, dude, you know, he's supposed to have all this money, you know, like Little Rod, and you heard the conversation, like, dude, why didn't you just pay him? Be done with it. Like I said, you know, in the conversation, that's one thing Diddy can't get around. You can't get around it. Hey, dog, you know, go ahead, you know, you might as well get your lawyer to get at my lawyer, because, you know, everybody's suing me now. So you might as well just go ahead and get in line. Get in line. You know, the man put up the work. He did the work. You should have paid him. It's just as simple as that. You can't duck and dodge that. You know, all of this ballerific and, you know, champagne popping and doing all of these other things. Like I said, don't know how that got paid, but, you know, you gave Cassie $20 million. And she still came to court and testified against you. You was paying the girl, Jane Doe, $10,000 a month, right? And she still came to court and testified against you. The guy, Little Rod, I'll just say this about him, in regards to the production work that he put up. The man put up the work, you liked his work, and then when it came time to pay him, you know what I mean? It was like, hurry up. wait a minute, hurry up, you know, as far as the work. But then when it came time to pay, it was like, wait a minute. So I think a lot of times, you know, people bring it upon themselves. I just don't understand that part for what I'll say about that, right? But the question, right? Did Diddy betray his lawyer? Some speculate that Diddy allowed filming because, right, he intended to produce his own documentary. That's what most people were saying. Who was he producing it for? We don't know that, right? He believed the footage would show him fighting back, right? Okay, he may have not understood the legal risk. All three of those can be true or not true at the same time, right? If that's true, but if those three are true, he intended to produce his own documentary. He believed the footage would show him fighting back. He may have not understood the legal risk. If that's true, right, then he unintentionally destroyed his own confidentiality, if you will, right? He unintentionally destroyed his own confidentiality, which lawyers typically warn defendants never to do, right? So if you understand that, you know, say what's up in the chat if you understand what I'm saying. So like I said, the question is, did Diddy betray his lawyers? People are speculating, right? You know. Now, if Diddy intended to produce his own documentary and hire the videographer, or he believed the footage would show him fighting back, at what time, I don't know. Or he may have not understood legal risk. If that's true, if any of that's true, he unintentionally destroyed his own confidentiality, which lawyers, like I say, they typically warn defendants never to do. Attorney's perspective. Once you invite cameras into a strategy call, your privilege can evaporate. So who invited the cameras in? Did he give somebody else permission to invite the cameras in? Did he invite the cameras in himself? Right? Because his confidentiality or rights to confidentiality involving attorney-client privilege may have been unintentionally destroyed at that particular time. Okay, so what's the truth, y'all? What's the truth? Like I said, you know, you hear people going back and forth, and like I said, it's a conversation to be had in regards to that. A lot of the footage is basically showing Diddy in a unfavorable light, if you will, and I don't think he's happy with that. But the question is that attorney-client privilege, him betraying his lawyer? Like I said, I wouldn't say that he betrayed his lawyer. I wouldn't say that. I would say whoever sold that footage, or better yet, whoever owned that footage, if there's a lawsuit that comes behind that, should have used a little bit more discretion just in relation to the part where Diddy's talking to his lawyer, right? Because evidently there was no problem in selling the footage, because, you know, Diddy's lawyers would be like, hey, we have a work for hire agreement, our client owned that footage, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sure that the lawyers, Netflix lawyers, legal team, whatever, they probably looked at that and they saw that and it was like, hey, well, you know, there's agreement between you and him. It's like, no, but there's no agreement between you and him. Well, copyright law says what? If you shot it, you own it. Unless there was some other kind of situation that that makes it anything other than if the videographer shot it, that he owns it, right? So, like I said, so what's the truth? What's the safest answer, right? Both of these things can be true at the same time, right? Diddy may have compromised his own legal shield by doing that, right? The videographer may still have violated, you know, the ethical boundaries. All of these things can be true, and that's the crazy part about it, right? Netflix basically, I would say Netflix strategically exploited a gray area for ratings, right? So did he compromise his own legal shield? Did the videographer, did he still basically violate the ethical boundaries, right? And did Netflix strategically exploit a gray area for ratings? All of those can be true. All of those can be true, right? So now, and you better believe, right? his appeals attorneys are looking at this. They were looking at everything that they possibly can in regards to what this is. I don't know if Mark Agnifilo is mad, upset about this situation. Mark Garrigo said that if he was Mark Agnifilo when he was talking to Harvey Levin, he said if he was Mark Agnifilo, he would be pissed off right now, based on that phone conversation being broadcast in this highly popular documentary. And I could understand that, but should he be mad at Sean P. Diddy Combs? Like I said, I can see if Diddy, intended to record the conversation and then somehow, some way intended to air it. I don't think that's what it appears to be. We can see that clearly, and Diddy didn't seem like he was playing to the cameras. He basically seemed like, he basically fighting for his life and saying, hey, you know what, we losing right now. We're losing the narrative of public opinion. We're losing the narrative of this and that and all of these other things, right? And so that's the part that people have to ask themselves, right? But you can best believe that the lawyers are looking at it, right? And so whoever that videographer is, I think he should be concerned about possibly being sued. If Diddy team feels like, hey, you know what, this was violated. This is what happened. Blah, blah. But I would say too late for that, kind of like, because the video footage has been shown around the world. I believe the Sean Combs, The Reckoning, was the #1 watched. Then Stranger Things had came in. It made it at #1. But at first, Sean Combs did Reckoning was #1. Then Stranger Things came out. Stranger Things became #1, and the Diddy documentary became #2 on Netflix, I believe, as of right now. So, I would expect that the lawyers to some filings arguing prejudicial release of privileged conversations, y'all. Once again, expect some filings arguing prejudicial release of privileged conversations. If I would say, if nothing else, you know what I mean? So like I said, drop your thoughts below. Tell me what you guys think, because I think this is very important. Who's that Jersey Rick again? Jersey Rick say, what you say, Jersey Rick? At the end of the day, this is all Diddy's doing. You can't continue to operate as such by scamming and not following through on agreements. Not like I said, Jersey Rick, I agree with you on that. I agree that the way Diddy handled his business, for once again, outside looking in, it looked like, he was on top of his game. I think for the most important things, he was on top of his games, the big deals. But like I said, he tried to treat, from what people have been saying, Roger Bond, Little Rod, and the other people who may have not have been as important as the major corporations that he did deals with, he didn't treat them with that same kind of due diligence and respect that he did, in other situations. But I think I think sometimes it's the bottom up, you know what I mean? And not the top down. But both of those things also can be true at the same time. How you treat the people that you feel like are beneath you or don't have as much as you, and they've rendered their work. And, but like I said, once again, you can't also be too happy to do business with somebody, right? That you don't protect yourself with some kind of contract that protects you, your legal right, and your work product and the work environment. I think that's very important. Like I said, and if people don't want to do that, then I don't think that one should do business with them, because like I said, hey, if you paying them, then they should understand that. If they don't understand that, then they're really not ready to do business. And it's just as simple as that. You know what I mean? When you think about the big picture. You say whether peace for 1000 said, in my opinion, Netflix may have a huge issue, because if they sue, it's most likely going to be to character assassination, because a lot of the false info is coming out about the documentary. You know what, Peace? Like I said, once again, I did the thing on Wayne Burroughs. in regards to what he said about the Biggie's funeral being charged to Biggie's royalties. Like I said, there is no documentation. And then somebody tried to come and sparse it up and be like, well, he said that he think it might have been charged to it. You know, well, what was the accusation all about? Because if it's just a thought, then there's some doubt there. That's not a fact. That's basically you trying to cast some kind of bad light over somebody and say, well, I think they charged, Biggie's funeral to Biggie. You know what I mean? Or they tried to anyway. That's not a factual statement. You know what I mean? What's up, y'all kids? Always a pleasure. Like I said, so that's a possibility, but I'm looking at more, when you think about this situation, I'm looking at more of, as far as the lawyers, right? The filings arguing prejudicial release of privileged conversations. Once again, Diddy was talking to his lawyer on the phone about legal strategy. You see what I'm saying? That wasn't supposed to be released. If there was any discretion that was supposed to be used at the time when they came across that piece of information, even though it was juicy and him talking to his lawyer and all of those things, right? I'm sure. And you got to understand what I'm saying. When I said that Netflix strategically exploited a gray area for ratings, right? Like I said, it's a gray area. And so by that being what that is, they can argue, Diddy's legal team can argue, basically say, hey, you know what? They release basically prejudicial and private and privileged information on this documentary that they weren't supposed to release. And they were supposed to exercise a little bit more discretion, and they say, well, we reviewed it. But now you jump into, well, Netflix saying, hey, you know what? We're indemnified from that. Like I said, we didn't shoot the footage, so we don't know who shot the footage or is responsible for owning the footage. They said, well, we didn't shoot the footage. The producers say, hey, they bought it. They brought the documentary to us. We thought it was, worthy of releasing. We thought the information was public worthy, and so we released the documentary on that platform. At the end of that, then once again, that's one side of the argument, and now the producers are left to sit down and sort that out and fight that one out. So that's the most important part in regards to this. I understand, like the defamation and all of those things. Like I said, for false statements and stuff like that may have been made, or they may have being alleged that they were made at that particular time. What's up, POC 9900? What's good? Yeah, like I said, but yeah, and like I said, the deal with the false information aspect. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff coming out right now. Like I said, if you check out the Art of Dialogue, he just did a video today with Gene Deal. I don't know if y'all seen that yet, but Diddy's baby mom, Misa, coming at Gene Deal. She's been saying a lot of stuff in public. So like I said, you can expect things to kind of like heat up. Like I said, like I said, without any kind of proof. But Gene Deal, like I said, once again, my thing is go check out the interview over on the Art of Dialogue. He just dropped it. You know what I mean? That's the latest information, and they're talking about that over on the Art of Dialogue. And so, like I said, Art, he coming with that A game as far as, trying to cover the latest and dealing with the latest controversies in hip hop and the whole culture, right? So definitely go check that out. I think that's important. But I seen, I think it was the Shade Room or somebody like that, basically talking about, what Gene Deal had alleged about that. POC 9900. Yeah, like I said, well, the Tisa Tells situation, when you think about the Tisa Tells thing, it's she was calling black men the N-word during the trial. You know what I mean? Like I said, the people were confronting her based on her slanted, biased opinion of what was being on and what was reported in the case. She actually, for what reason they had her in the documentary. I think the producer, the young lady Alex, I think she's from Texas, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think Tisa Tells is from Texas. I don't know. So how that works and why she would be someone who would be featured in this documentary based on information that would be totally untrue and one-sided, if you would, based on her reporting. Like I said, there were numerous things that Tisa Tells had reported on at that particular time that we knew to be untrue, and people who came out and actually reported it, who were there also, basically tried to give both sides. Like I said, we can tell basically when she was reporting, because if you go back, and for the people who in the chat who know, we were live every day, right? Reporting word for word what was going on in the courtroom. There was no bias. Anything that it was unfavorable to Diddy, we put it up. You go back and check out the old live videos of that when we broadcasted that. And so if it was favorable, unfavorable, everything from Capricorn Clark to the young lady, you name it, every day we were live with that information. So, and the problem is that when Tisa Tells would come out and say something, most of the people who were informed would know immediately that it was one-sided and biased based on the fact that we were getting damn near 95% of the testimony that was being said in court at that particular time. You know, you say, can Art of Dialogue be sued for having Gene Deal saying stuff and Tisa Tells? Absolutely not. Like I said, you know, once again, the Art of Dialogue is not responsible for what Gene Deal claims to know personally or otherwise based on his personal interaction with Sean P. Diddy Combs. You see what I'm saying? The only person that could be held liable for that is Gene Deal. You know what I mean? Like I said, once again, you know, you're not held responsible for what somebody is saying. That person is held responsible if they're defaming somebody and saying things that may not be that may be untrue from that perspective. Like I said, but sometimes people say incendiary things, but no, Art of Dialogue can't be sued for nothing like that. That wouldn't be something. You say, POC 9900 say, I'm late to the chat, so I don't know what exactly direction the video is going. But 50 Cent is dirty as fuck for 3 out of 4 of them episodes, like he was trying to tell Diddy's life story. Like I said, now that part right there, see, I don't know how much 50 had to do with anything of telling anything. This is the thing, you know what I mean? You know, where they had a director, like I said, the director, I don't think Diddy, or should I say 50 wrote the script, or there was a script. You dealing with interviewing people. People are interviewing somebody. I think Marlon Wayans touched on this. You know, you can interview anybody. They can say anything. You can get whatever perspective that you want at that particular time and talk about whatever you want to, right? To get people to lean to a certain angle or certain thought or whatever, right? But like I said, that's why I was trying to tell people that the Keep D part of the documentary was so important, because there's a lot of people been saying, oh man, you know, Keep D lied and he was saying this and he was saying that. Like I said, and they, you know, I had somebody in one of my chats, they was like, you know, Delray, you got to make it make sense. I said, I don't have to make it make anything. I didn't do a profit deal with the government. Keep D did. And from what the government is saying, that Keep D violated that profit deal. You see what I'm saying? So, but this live in particular is basically referring to the fact whether did Diddy betray his own lawyer or did the videographer violate the attorney-client privilege, because that's the big argument right now. You see what I'm saying? The argument is not, oh, okay, well, you know, Diddy basically, they put out, they say it was a hit piece and all of this. Netflix said no, it wasn't that. Okay, now, Diddy's team said that the footage was stolen and, you know, and all of these other things. Was it or was it not? Who owned the footage? All of those things come into play. But more importantly, that conversation between Diddy's and his lawyer is privileged conversation, and usually protected under attorney-client privilege. So now, in airing that conversation, did the producers violate any kind of privileged conversation law or anything like that? Or are they going to say, well, Netflix was responsible? So it can go various ways, but I don't think that it would, you could sue whoever you want to sue. But like I said, once again, usually that's to get to the bottom of what it is. And then it gets passed down to who is responsible. Like I say, if the videographer knew what that was, and like I said, then they say, well, hey, you know what? In selling this footage, Netflix say, hey, you hold us, you indemnify us from any kind of lawsuit, anything like that, then it'd be the videographer's responsibility. The same thing with the producers, making sure the producers got all the clearances and things that they needed to get, right? So that they avoid any kind of lawsuit or litigation in regards to not handling that business. So it's going to be very important. Like I said, I can't wait to see what it is, you know what I mean? But I wanted to go live about this because I thought it was very important, because that's one of the most important things. Like I said, TMZ, they went live about it, and Mark Garagos talked about it. Mark Garagos said he would basically be pissed off if it was him. And I can understand that, but then on the flip side, it wasn't meant to be released as far as Diddy was concerned, but it got released. Who's that? Ray Johnson say, how do the public know what kind of deals Diddy made with any of the people that was involved with Diddy? Nobody showed contracts. They can say anything on camera. Ray Johnson, you absolutely right about that. So it was, it seems like a lot of stuff was a speculation fest. Other than, like I said, Little Rod's situation with the conversations and the things that he was basically showing. He was in the studio. They showed the work in the studio, and then they showed the conversations after. But like I said, but a lot of the other stuff that was being alleged by people who were supposedly close to the situation, and people gonna believe what they're gonna believe, or want to believe. And like I said, that's why, from that perspective, if a person keeps admitting knowingly false things, that person, that individual can be held liable. You feel me? So one must tread lightly about what they're saying in regards to what it is. Like I said, but Gene Deal is basically responding to what Misa Hilton said, in her recently comments about Gene Deal allegedly saying that somehow, I think Wolf was one of Diddy's kids' real father and not Diddy. Like I said, once again, don't know how true that is, but that was one of the things that she was replying to in regards to that. And it's also talk about the producer who did the Sean Combs, The Reckoning, is now trying to talk to Misa about her life story in regards to the earlier foundation building of Bad Boy and so on and so forth. I really don't think that there's anything else to cover. I think they left out a lot of things that were important that could have possibly made the documentary a little bit better and a little bit more interesting and factual, if you will. But that doesn't seem like where they were going at that particular time. Ray Johnson said, I haven't watched either one of the documentaries, and I'm not going to watch them. Like I said, that's to each his own, man. Like I say, people, watch what they want to watch. Who else is that? Yeah, Diddy was on drugs, like I said, without a doubt. But a lot of stuff you can't blame on the drugs. You know what I mean? Because if you were smart enough to do certain things, then you should have been smart enough to do everything. You know what I mean? Like I said, once again. Yeah. I don't know if that, like I say, Mark Agnifilo is mad or not. Nobody said that he's mad. He hasn't spoken out. I'm sure him and Diddy probably had a conversation. And the way that it was portrayed in the documentary, I don't think Mark Knifilo think that, I don't think he thought that Diddy was trying to put him out there like that. It's different when you have malicious intent, you know, and trying to expose somebody and you recording that conversation and then you putting it out there like that, right? You know what I mean? That's one thing. Another thing is, you know, somebody recording the conversation and, you know, it gets released. Like I said, when you deal with that aspect of it, it's different, right? It's different because now you deal with like invasion of privacy, conversation of privileged material, the misappropriation of that. You know, you're dealing with the violation of confidentiality. You see what I'm saying? So, right. So, like I said, and the law is what? Any outside party who knowingly publishes privileged content can trigger legal actions, right? The invasion of privacy, conversations of privileged material, misappropriation, violation of confidentiality, right? And like I said, I think Netflix attorneys knew this, which is why, like they said, some footage was muted out, right? Some, you know, certain statements are edited and subtitles are omitted in places. I don't think that they wanted that kind of, like I said, I'm sure they went over everything, man, and I'm sure they have indemnity clauses. So, like I said, this is one to be watched closely. Like I said, I thought the documentary was you know, for entertainment purposes. I didn't look for it to be any kind of factual thing that I didn't really or wasn't aware of already. Like I said, you know, over here on Straight Game, we covered the trial gavel to gavel with the coverage and all of the testimony, right? So it wasn't nothing that we were given like, you know, hey, we signed with it. No, this is what it is. This is what they're saying. This is what's going on in court right now. And that's that. May the chips fall where they fall. But like I said, other people seem like they had, you know, some kind of dog in the fight and they would lean a certain kind of way. I don't think that you do yourself any kind of a credibility favor when the person does that. But it was happening anyway. You see what I'm saying? You say, Delray, did you check out the part where they said Diddy had it? And, yeah, I seen that. Mark Dizzle. I seen that. I was like, and I was trying to think about you said before the shooting at the nightclub with Shine. Absolutely. But the people you talking about when he hit Steve Stout with the bottle, right? You know what I mean? I don't know how that, like I said, they supposedly had settled that. So I don't think that, but like I said, I heard that, but I don't really know what other charge that he might, but I heard that in the documentary. You know what I mean? So yeah, whatever that was. Yeah, we said William Amy. Yeah, the music, and it's not so much as the music industry is a dirty game. It's that a lot of times when artists get deals, right? Or when they have an opportunity to be famous, you know, they do it for the optics. They do it to be or appear to be, you know, it's like, you know, he got $1 million deal. You know what I mean? You got a few dollars. You know, you look out for your mama. All of those things. So a lot of things, you know, people start to get tunnel vision. And you know, as you heard the girl who was in what was that? The making of the band or whatever, and she said once she got picked, they gave her a pamphlet that was thick as a Bible, right? And I was thinking, as I was watching the documentary, I was saying she signed every page, and they only gave them 24 hours to basically look at the documentation in the contract. And I'm almost certain, just by hearing her explain herself, she didn't know half of the shit that she was reading in that contract, but she signed it anyway. And I'll give you this. Other than the people that we know, 112, The Locks, Faith Evans, Total, Biggie, may he rest in peace. Craig Mack, may he rest in peace. Black Rob, may he rest in peace. None of those artists outside of what that was, D'Anthony Kane, Dirty Money, none of them are successful. None of them basically parlayed that fame, those opportunities into anything else. like I said, once again, that's where you have that one-track mind thing that comes in once somebody get a few dollars, right? When you're supposed to be thinking long-term, like, hey, you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to make this happen, right? I'm going to protect my intellectual properties. I'm going to do all of the things, right, that put me in a good position to make power moves later on down the line. You know, and you see certain people get it, like 50. He got it, you know, investing in vitamin water, right? Taking and then going to doing films and starting to act and do all of those other things, trying to parlay that situation into something a little bit bigger than just what the music was. You know what I mean? Because you get older, you know, and you got to start thinking like, hey, you know, what I'm going to do after this? Did he invest in any money? Did he do it? And none of those people that we saw in that video, because they didn't have any real important people in the, you know, that well-known people in the documentary, if you want to be perfectly honest, right? You know, they had footage, you know, stock footage and things like that, but nobody real important. So when you get it, you understand it. You're like, well, damn. No, you say, do I believe Kalina never saw anything? Now, like I said, I don't think, like I said, once again, you got to understand something, man. Like I told y'all about the Jay-Z Diddy thing when Diddy got in trouble, when it looked like, you know, he was bitten and he was bleeding a little bit from what the public and everything was going on. And when that tape came out with Cassie, right? You got to just go back and look at the accusations that was made about Jay-Z and Diddy involving the young lady that they made the allegation. It was false, right? I need you to take that and I need you to apply that to every other civil lawsuit that comes up, because that was a test to see if it would work. And as you see in the documentary, you see that there's supposedly or allegedly 77 lawsuits still pending, right? A lot of them got dropped based on the fact that these people who were John Does or Jane Does didn't want themselves revealed. Now, if you want the $20 million like Cassie got, right? Cassie, she went all the way. She told, hey, look, we was doing these freak offs. I was having sex with these different men. It was this, it was that. We was doing all of this. She told everything. If you want any kind of money like Cassie got or to be paid, you got to reveal yourself. And when a person, this is just in my opinion, does not want to reveal themselves, right? It tells me that there was a little bit of hesitancy to believe their accusations. Not that you don't, but it's like, hey, this happened based on whatever. And then you have people who say, okay, you know, sometimes it's a money grab. So what was the thing with the Diddy thing and the Jay-Z thing that got it dismissed or voluntarily dismissed by the young lady once Jay-Z started to put up that real fight and say, hey, hold on. If you think I did it, well, charge me criminally then. Don't just go after the civil aspect of it, right? So much so that the case was dropped. Jay-Z still right now today has a defamation case against the lawyer, Tony Busby, as well as the young lady. You got to understand how detrimental those accusations were when they weren't true, but the media was pushing it or reporting on it, right? Like it had some kind of validity to it. You see what I'm saying? But we come to find out that it didn't. It didn't. Point blank, period. So you can take that with a grain of salt and say, okay, cool. The situation with Diddy and Cassie, and we know Cassie was a willing participant. We know Jane Doe was a willing participant based on the testimony in the case. And like I said, everybody else that came along was like, yeah, he hit me. Yeah, he drugged me. Yeah, he did this. Yeah, he did that. But before this Cassie situation, nobody said anything. So to me, if one was going to say something, they would have said it at that particular time when it happened, right? Did we know about that shooting in the bathroom? No. Why? Because it was alleged that whoever the person was that was shot in that studio bathroom, right? That it was alleged that Diddy paid him $50,000. And he didn't go through with the charges. Nobody was charged. You know what I mean? So we understood how the money could work. We also saw that at the hotel, when you talk about the after the Cassie thing, right? They asked her that she wanted to press charge. No, right? Diddy paid the dudes for what he thought was the video. Okay, cool. Here you go, $100,000. You know, so we saw people actively being bought off and situations happening like that. But at the end of the day, you know, that still didn't work. He still ended up in court. He still ended up fighting for his life. And that I think that those charges, a lot of those charges were warranted. No. I think they were misapplied based on the fact that if you wanted to think about somebody who was actually being trafficked, it was the male sex workers that was actually being trafficked. You know what I mean? They were the, if you want to say victims of it per se, to a certain degree, they were the real victims of it. But the prosecution didn't deal with it like that. You know what I mean? They just didn't deal with it like that. And so, you know, two charges of the Mann Act, and you know, he in Fort Dix right now and doing his time or whatever have you. But yeah, it's crazy, man. It's crazy. But like I said, you know, the title of the video, when you think about it, I want you, as you watch this video, think about it, comment down below and tell me what you think. Do you think Diddy betrayed his lawyer because he didn't tell him that he was being recorded? But Diddy wasn't doing the recording. So the person who owned the video was doing the recording. Do you think the videographer violated Diddy's attorney-client privilege by actually having that stuff aired in the documentary, knowing that Diddy was talking to his lawyer, and that was a private conversation that shouldn't have been aired? It's a lot of questions to be answered involving that. You know what I mean? Yeah, the love of money. The love of money, man. The love of money. You say Joy spoke in the doc. You say 50 Cent didn't mention Joy as a victim. No, I mean, it's not even whether he mentioned her as a victim or not. We seen, you know, she was, you know, on the stand. Diddy was still paying her $10,000 a month while she was testifying against him. I mean, how could you be a victim? You know what I mean? That says you're a willing participant at that particular time. Like the Indian juror, the guy with the glasses on. Like when he spoke, he basically said, you know, they asked him, did you think that Cassie was a victim? He was like, no. You know what I mean? Based on the testimony, you know, 1 minute they argument, the next minute they in love, they taking trips, you know, they walking the red carpet and all of those things. And that's what I was basically saying during the time that we were, you know, broadcasting it live. It was like, I'm like, well, hold on. You know, she has an opportunity to leave and never come back again. Like anybody did, but she chose to keep coming back. I guess the ties that bind them together were stronger than the ones that tore them apart. You know, the trips, the cars, the money, the clothes, the everything. You know what I mean? The level of prestige, and you know, yeah, I guess that all outweighed the common sense factor of, you know what, this is not a good situation for me. He's abusive, he hits on me, he beats me, he does all of these things. And like I said, I believe those things to be true, not only with the video from the hotel, but like I said, just the pictures that were shown and all of these other things. So, but like I said, you know, we just sitting here, we're spectating and looking at what's going on. And like I said, here comes this 4-part documentary, you know what I mean, if you will, which a lot of people are attacking a lot of the allegations that have been made in there, you know, people coming out and speaking out against it. So, and when you say Ray Johnson, when you say they, who do you mean? You said the Lil Rod, who's that Peace 4100 said the Lil Rod Tyrone Blackburn civil lawsuit regarding his $220K claim, including royalties for the Love album, the judge denied. He said, if I were Diddy, I'd stay in jail because seems like 50 wants him out of here. You say he stay in jail, man. You crazy, man. So that was denied. I didn't hear anything about that. Piece 4100, 41,000, should I say? So yeah. So oh wow. So if that, so now, but that's another thing. A piece 41,000. You know, the Little Rod situation. For people who don't know, when Little Rod first came out, Little Rod had a GoFundMe up, and I think he was asking for something like $25,000 or something like that to help because he might have to sue Diddy or whatever have you, right? I understand that. But then came this lawsuit alleging all of these things that Diddy had allegedly did to him or he participated in or whatever have you, right? And none of those things were spoken about prior to him filing, prior to Cassie, you know, filing her situation. And so, but this is the mistake that Little Rod made. And when you file, I would say, what the judge considered at the time, once they went back to court, frivolous accusations against people who didn't have anything to do with it. And what I mean by that is, in Little Rod's lawsuit, he sued Diddy, Christina Karam, Lucian Grange, the head of Universal Music, I think Universal Music, basically throwing shit up against the wall to see what would stick, right? That's messy. Lucian Grange didn't have nothing to do with that. There was an accusation of some kind of and what really infused the whole situation was the accusation that was saying that Diddy had tapes. Remember, y'all, you got, for the people that don't know and got lost in traffic, right? It was the accusation that Diddy had tapes with sports figures, politicians, high-level music executives in compromising positions, right? And Diddy would use these tapes to blackmail people. This was in that lawsuit. And these were the accusations that was being made. Now, none of that was proven. None of it. The only thing we come to know is that Diddy was a cuckold, and he liked to watch his woman, who, you know, would agree to do freak offs and things like that, be with another man, and that was his thing. Okay, cool. So when Lil Rod filed his lawsuit, there were all of these other people included that really didn't have anything to do with anything. We understand that, and when we understood that now, truthfully and factually, based on what happened in court. We saw that none of that, the Justin Bieber stuff and, you know, all of that. Like I say, once again, you know, I'll always go back to this, and I try to tell people, because we love to believe bullshit. You know what I mean? It seems like sometimes the bullshit just prevails. You know what I mean? When we talk about, you know, being on point and what it is and all of these things, right? It seems like, it seems like the bullshit just prevails. And so I'll say this. I'm going to do this. Look, hold on, excuse me. Yeah, I'm going to do this. I'm going to show y'all something. Watch this. So now, and I'll go back to this. I just want to, because we got to think outside the box. A lot of people don't care about thinking about it. They just absorb with their own shit and their bullshit. So this right here. Once again, remember this book right here. Remember this book. This first came out when Diddy went to jail. This book came out, right? It was the #1 bestseller, right? It was the #1 bestseller on Amazon. Supposedly from Kim Porter, the files that she had with Diddy, alleging Diddy did all of these things and blase, blase, blah. It was, and you see the name that's scratched out on the bottom. It says Jamal T. Millwood. That was a name that Tupac used as an anonymous name when he would check in the hotels. They tried to tie this to Tupac and basically say, you know, this was Tupac speaking from behind the grave through Kim Porter. Man, it was, none of this was true. In this whole little pamphlet right here. I don't even know if you can still get this book, but I interviewed the guy on the Art of Dialogue, right, by the name of Chris Todd, because he made some statements about Tupac that I knew not to be true because I was there the night when Tupac and Faith met. So now, if you take this book right here, and you know now that all of us in here that talked about Will Smith, Jay-Z, Kim Porter being with Tupac and sleeping with Tupac, like I said, if you want to believe that, then you can believe it. But it wasn't true. But you still can believe it, even though it ain't true. That's on you. You know, if you want to fill your mind with a whole bunch of lies and BS, then you can do that. I say that to say this. the situation with Jay-Z and Diddy and all of those things, we found out that also, ladies and gentlemen, to be not true. Right? And the same information that was being pushed, right now, Diddy is suing and has a defamation lawsuit against an attorney and her client, right? The people who were responsible for this book. Because they said they had hard drives from Kim Porter. So when they were investigating before they charged Diddy with the situation with Cassie, they were looking for more evidence, and the evidence that could corroborate some of the behavior and patterns of behavior that they were basically stating in regards to Diddy being who they wanted him to be, was trying to paint him out to be, saying that there was, and in those tapes they said it was young children and things unbecoming. Go look at the interview that I did on the Art of Dialogue with the dude Chris Todd, and it'll give you a little bit more insight into what that was. And at the end of the interview, the guy, which his real name wasn't Chris Todd, right? He got offended because I was asking him real questions. Like I said, people were like, oh, this guy, he didn't blah, blah, blah. And I was like, man, where's all of this vitriol coming from? When in fact, the information in this book is not true. And we know it's not true now. So you got to understand, sometimes there are orchestrated events that are done by powerful people, right? Who want you to believe something that is simply not true about somebody who may or may not be powerful. Now, I'll flip it to you like this. This 4-part docuseries. Once again, if you take that book and you put it into context and you look at the documentary, you'll see somewhat of the same patterns. We see no real documentation, right? Other than the part about Keefy D, and when they're playing the tapes, Keefy D had a profit deal. All of those things are well documented, proven by documentation, signatures. If you did the research on it, you'd understand that's what that was, and that's why Keefy D was ultimately charged in the murder of Tupac Shakur with gang enhancements. So that part right there was solid, right? In what Keefy D alleged, the relationship with him and Diddy and all of those other things, being at the Peterson Automotive Museum the night Biggie was killed, the Vegas, all of these things Keefy D testified to under oath that he was there in regards to that. So there's one part that makes it interesting, and then there's another part that makes it more speculative, if you will, right? It's up to you to be able to want to decide what you want to believe or not. Right? It's just that simple. But like I said right here, today, dealing with this situation involving did Diddy betray his lawyer, or did the videographer violate Diddy's attorney-client privileges, knowing that Diddy was on the phone talking to his lawyer? Like I said, but when you taking in information, like I said, people want to believe what they want to believe, and that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. So you can best believe this ain't the end of that tunnel right now. You know what I mean? Michelle Richmond said, if Little Rod wasn't G before Diddy got to him, he is now. Shaking my head because of his evil act. Like I said, I'm not going to make that accusation about nobody because I don't know. And I'm really not concerned anybody's sexual orientation and nothing like that. That ain't none of my business. You know what I mean? Like I said, all I know is that, when Little Rod filed his lawsuit, he made accusations about a bunch of people that shouldn't have been in his lawsuit. And as a matter of fact, when they went back to court, the judge dismissed all of the claims against Universal, against Lucian Grange, against Christina Karam, against all of these other people. The judge dismissed that. And Tyrone Blackburn actually apologized, from what I understand, to the judge because, he should have known better than to put all of those people. Those people didn't have anything to do with that. You know what I mean? And like I said, it was just trying to sue a bunch of people to see if he could force some kind of settlement. That's also what was alleged in regards to the attorney Tyrone Blackburn from various other lawyers and lawyers affiliated with Diddy's camp in regards to the lawsuits that were being filed against Diddy, right? One part of Little Rod's lawsuit I do understood was staying. I think it was the essay part of it. I don't know where that stands at this particular point, but that was left to move forward, if you will. So like I said, we're gonna see what happens, man. But like I said, chime in, tell me, do you think Diddy betrayed his lawyer by having a conversation and knowing it was recorded, or like I said, not being intended to be released at any type of time or any time during that time, specific time, but then later when Diddy went to jail, do you think that the videographer violated his attorney-client privilege by selling it and then having it aired on the Sean Combs, The Reckoning, ladies and gentlemen? Like I said, chime in, tell me what you think. I think this is a very important conversation that needs to be had because, like I said, a lot of people do stuff for fame. A lot of people do stuff for money. A lot of shit that's unbecoming, if you will, right? You said, Delray, where's the... Like I said, I'm not talking about Reggie the Rat Wright Jr., man. Like I said, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. Is who he is. He's going to be that. That's who he is. That's who he's made himself into being. And a lot of the things that I've pointed out, enough videos in regards to him. Like I said, once again, him snitching on Suge Knight 3 days after Tupac died proves to me that Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. was not in mourning. He was not in any kind of way concerned about Tupac or anything like that. He was worried about himself and trying to protect his position. His security company failed in Las Vegas. He's told numerous lies. He's also lied to the grand jury in the Keefe D case in regards to the Nextel radios, in which he basically said at the time that Frank said, that Michael Moore said that he heard got him. Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. basically said that that the Nextel radios did not have that capability. But later on in 2023, Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. went to Las Vegas or wherever they were having the proceedings at in regards to the grand jury. He went in there and told the grand jury that the Nextel radios, in fact, did have that walkie-talkie feature. So, like I said, there's so many lies, you know, when you're dealing with Reggie the Rat Wright Jr. It's just pathetic, you know. None of the things that it just doesn't surprise me anymore, you know, and yeah, it's kind of sickening, in fact, you know. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's Ann and Lee. Good to see you. Always a pleasure. I hope all is well with you, you know. And like I say, happy holidays to everybody, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate you guys coming through, listening. More importantly, tell me what you think. Yo, chime down in the middle of the comment section, and tell me what you think. And your boy Delray, straight gang.
Blackjack. Life is like some cards. It's not what you dealt, but how you play it. Play each situation correctly. I remember they used to laugh at a